The rain had been coming down in sheets for hours, blurring the road, the treetops, the horizon itself, until the world outside my windshield was nothing but a shifting watercolor of gray and black. I was somewhere in northern Oregon, driving alone, heading toward my brother's cabin near the Washington border. It was supposed to be a 3-hour trip. At that point, it had already stretched into 5. I remember thinking, this is the kind of night when bad things happen. Not that I believed in omens or superstitions, but something about that storm felt wrong. Wrong in a way I couldn't name yet. I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. The highway was empty. The forest pressed in tight on both sides, towering pines swaying under the wind, their shadows stretching across the road like long fingers. My wipers could barely keep up, slapping frantically back and forth. I leaned forward, squinting, trying to make out the yellow lines. I told myself I was just tired, just stressed, just irritated at the weather. Then the radio cut out. Not faded, cut, like someone had yanked the cord from the wall. The sudden silence startled me more than it should have. I reached out, tapping the screen. Nothing, not even static. Great, I muttered. Perfect. And then I heard it. A faint sound under the hum of the engine. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded like it was coming from the back seat. I froze. My foot lifted off the gas without me realizing it. The tapping continued, slow, deliberate, too steady to be raindrops. I didn't want to look. God, I didn't want to. But I did. I turned my head inch by inch, bracing myself, and saw nothing. The back seat was empty, but the sound didn't stop. Tap, tap, tap. Now that I was listening closely, it sounded like it was coming from inside the trunk. A single cold thought slid into my mind like a needle. I hadn't put anything in there. For a few seconds, all I did was drive and pretend I hadn't heard anything. That was easier, safer. If I didn't acknowledge the sound, maybe it would disappear. But it didn't disappear. It grew louder. Tap, tap, tap. Insistent, demanding. What the hell? I whispered under my breath. I pulled the car to the shoulder. The pavement hissed beneath the tires, water spraying outward. The forest around me felt unnervingly still. The rain was loud, but everything else, the wind, the animals, the rustling branches, felt muted, as though the storm were swallowing every other sound. For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the wheel, listening to the tapping echo through the frame of the car. I didn't want to get out. Every instinct in me said, don't. But I forced myself to open the door. The rain hit me like a curtain of ice as I stepped into the night. My clothes were soaked instantly. I walked around to the back of the car and hesitated. The tapping stopped. I held my breath. After a long, trembling moment, I lifted the trunk. Nothing. No luggage, no bags, not even trash. Just the empty molded plastic and metal. But the smell. It hit me immediately. A damp, earthy, moldy smell, like old leaves or old rot, or something that had been living in the dark for too long. I slammed the trunk shut. The tapping resumed. From inside my car, I stepped back, startled. It wasn't coming from the trunk anymore. It was coming from the backseat window, from outside. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, cold, like fingernails against glass. I lifted my eyes. There was nothing there, just rain streaking down the window, but the tapping continued. And then a new sound joined it, a whisper, leaning close to the window, too soft to be a voice carried by wind, a voice forming not words, but shapes that felt like my name. I bolted back into the driver's seat, slamming the door, locking it with shaking fingers. My chest felt tight, breath shallow. This is in your head, I told myself. Just the storm, just nerves. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I pressed the ignition button, relieved when the engine roared to life. The tapping stopped the moment the headlights turned on. I pulled back onto the road, pushing the car faster than before, desperate to reach somewhere, anywhere, with lights, with people, with something human. The storm thickened around me. The road twisted. Trees flashed by in the beam of my headlights. Then, a figure stepped into the road. I slammed the brakes. My seatbelt locked across my chest. The car skidded, fishtailing across wet asphalt before jerking to a stop. The figure stood 30 feet ahead. A person, or at least the shape of one. Tall, thin, too thin. The head was tilted as though the neck couldn't quite support it. The arms hung at angles that looked painfully wrong, and the entire outline of the figure shimmered, like heat rising off pavement, except colder. Rain poured through it. Through it. It wasn't solid. It wasn't a person. It slowly raised one hand and pointed directly at me. My blood turned to ice. I shifted into reverse, ready to back away, heart hammering, and then it vanished. Not in a blink, not fading. It simply wasn't there anymore. The road ahead was empty, but when I looked in my side mirror, I saw it, standing right next to my car, pressed against my back passenger door, head bent so low that its face hovered inches from the glass. I screamed and slammed the gas. The car lurched forward. The tire spun for a fraction of a second before gripping and launching me down the highway. I didn't look in the mirror again. I couldn't. But that didn't matter, because I could hear it. The voice. Not tapping this time. Speaking. Whispering. Too close. Too clear. You shouldn't have stopped. The voice wasn't inside the car. It wasn't outside either. It was in the rain. Every drop hitting the windshield carried it. Every streak of water sliding down the glass shaped itself into the faint suggestion of words. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles went white, tears mixing with sweat on my face. "Leave me alone," I choked out. The voice whispered back, "You opened the door." I didn't know what that meant, but the moment I heard it, something in my memory twitched, like a thread being pulled. Something about the trunk. Something about the smell. Something I didn't want to remember. I pushed the thought away, drove faster. And then I saw the sign. Rest area, 1 mile. A tiny flicker of hope. Shelter. Light. Anywhere but the road with that thing stalking me. I turned into the exit lane, but the moment I did, the rain stopped, hitting the windshield. Not everywhere. Just on the driver's side. On the passenger side, it still poured. On my side, nothing. As if something invisible was standing there, blocking it, leaning over the hood, watching me. My vision began to blur, not from tears, from the overwhelming sense of being seen. I pulled into the rest area. A small parking lot with a single dim lamp overhead and a public restroom building. No other cars, no people, just rain hitting pavement and the distant creaking of trees. I parked directly under the lamp, trying to convince myself that light meant safety. I stayed in the car for nearly 5 minutes, staring out through the fogged windshield, waiting for something to move in the darkness. Finally, I forced myself out. The moment the door opened, the smell hit me again. Rot, wet leaves, old earth. The same smell from the trunk. My stomach twisted. I hurried into the restroom building. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered. The air smelled of mildew and cheap cleaner. I splashed cold water on my face, gripping the sink as I tried to slow my breathing. That thing wasn't real, I whispered to myself. Just stress. Just exhaustion. The lights flickered again. On, off. On, off. On, then off. And this time they stayed off. I froze. The only sound was the rain hitting the roof. Then I heard breathing. Slow, wet, labored. It was behind me. I turned toward the doorway, my breath caught in my throat. A silhouette stood there. Not tall this time, not thin. Human-sized, human-shaped. It approached slowly, step by step, each movement accompanied by a soft squelch like wet feet on tile. I backed into the corner. When it passed under the faint light seeping in from the hallway, I saw its face. My face, but wrong. Skin swollen with water, eyes milky white, mouth half open as if filled with rainwater. It lifted a hand and pointed at me. "You left me there," it gurgled. My vision blurred, my ears rang. I couldn't breathe. Then the light snapped back on, and the figure was gone. I didn't wait. I ran. I sprinted to my car, fumbling with the keys, slipping on wet pavement. When I finally yanked the door open and threw myself inside, I locked it and curled forward, shaking. My car interior smelled like rot. It took me several seconds to realize why. The back seat was wet, soaked. Like someone had been sitting there, dripping. No. I reached back with trembling fingers and touched the seat. Cold. Ice cold. And then a hand closed around my wrist. I screamed. It was a human hand. Small, thin fingers. I jerked away, scrambling against my door. But when I looked back, no one was there. Just the wet indent of something that had been sitting in the middle of the seat. It slowly filled with rainwater, even though all windows were closed. I slammed the car into drive and peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. That's when the phone rang. My car's Bluetooth automatically connected, and the ringing filled the cabin, startling me. I looked at the caller ID. Unknown number. I hesitated, but the phone answered itself. A voice came through the speakers, my own voice, but distorted, drowned by rain. "Stop the car." I reached for the console to hang up. The voice spoke again. "I'm already inside." I don't remember how long I drove after that. The night stretched on endlessly, the rain swallowing the world. My thoughts blurred, my hands numb on the steering wheel. But the voice, the tapping, the whispers, they didn't stop. They repeated phrases over and over. You opened the door. You left me there. You promised you'd come back. At some point, the meaning of the words started to sink in, and memories I'd buried deep, too deep, began clawing their way up. The smell from the trunk, the voice in the rain, the waterlogged version of my own face. I remembered something I didn't want to remember. 5 years ago, a storm, a crash, someone with me, someone I was supposed to protect, a promise I broke, a body lost in the water. No closure, no grave, just guilt and silence. And now it had followed the rain, followed me, because I never let it rest. I don't know how I ended up on the old logging road. One moment I was on the highway, the next I was bouncing over mud and gravel, the forest pressing in. The rain eased. Mist rose from the ground. The trees around me leaned close, too close, as if listening. My headlights flickered. The engine sputtered, then died. I sat there in complete darkness, the world silent except for the faint drip of rain from the branches above. My chest tightened. The back seat creaked, slowly, as if someone were shifting their weight. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The voice spoke directly behind me. I never meant to scare you. Tears streamed down my face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The voice softened. I waited. I swallowed hard. I know. You didn't come. I tried. I swear I did. But you left me in the water. My hands shook violently. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I was hurt. I thought you were gone. Silence. Then, I wasn't. A hand, cold, small, familiar, rested on my shoulder. My breath hitched. I slowly turned. The figure in the back seat wasn't the tall, thin creature from the road. Wasn't the dripping, swollen version of myself. It was a child. A boy. 8 years old. My little brother. The one I never saved. His eyes were pale like moonlit water. His clothes drenched. His skin grayish, touched by river silt. But his expression wasn't angry. Just sad. Heartbreakingly sad. I'm so sorry, I whispered again. His lips trembled. I know. For the first time, his voice wasn't distorted, wasn't echoing, wasn't soaked in rain. It was exactly how I remembered it. Warm, small, human. He reached out and touched my cheek. I'm cold, he whispered. I woke to sunlight, real sunlight, soft and warm, filtering through the windshield. The storm was gone. The road was dry. Birds were chirping somewhere in the trees. I sat up slowly, muscles aching. My car was parked on the side of the highway. Not the logging road, not the rest area, just the normal, safe, mundane highway. As if none of it had happened. But the passenger seat next to me, the seat no one had used in years, still glistened with a faint sheen of moisture, and the faint smell of wet leaves lingered in the air. When I turned the ignition, The radio came on immediately. A weather report. The heaviest storm of the season passed through the region last night. My hands shook on the wheel. In the rearview mirror, for just a moment, I saw a small shape sitting in the back seat. But when I turned around, nothing. Just the indentation of where someone small might have been, and a single wet handprint on the window. It's been 6 months. I've driven that route again. Twice. Once in rain, once in sun. Nothing happened those times. But sometimes, when I'm alone, when the sky darkens, when the first cold drops of rain hit my windshield, I hear tapping. Soft, rhythmic, from the back seat. And every time I look in the mirror, I swear I see him. Not angry, not vengeful, just waiting. Because I made a promise once, and I broke it. And some things don't stop following you. Not even after they die.